Much for giving me some of your time today. I really appreciate it.
Of course, of course.
A podcast, the name of it's Young and Stuck. I thought that just essentially your whole message, your whole story could be super beneficial to anybody that's kind of in their 18 to essentially any point in their life, but being young and stuck and kind of not knowing how to move forward in your life, dealing with issues of self-belief and self-doubt. I just thought that you have a really inspiring story, so it can help other people. Yeah, so thank you so much. For the people that are going to be watching the podcast, Sarah is an Olympian athlete. She's an amazing race competitor. She's the founder of the Belief Initiative and, well, like the head of the entire show, and of many other things, a keynote speaker. So has lots of experience under her belt. So why don't you just tell me a bit about like what brought you into like sports in general when you were younger? What brought you into track and field and hurdling?
So I was never a good athlete growing up. In high school, I actually got cut from every single team I tried out for. And so in grade 9, I didn't make basketball, volleyball, soccer, field hockey, or badminton, like literally nothing. And then in the springtime, track and field doesn't make cuts. And so my high school teacher was like, you should try out for track, or like you should go out for the track team. And I was like, no, you don't want me on the team. Like, I am not good at sports. I've already got cut from every single team. And he's like, no, I want to teach you how to hurdle. And so he ended up teaching me how to hurdle. And 8 months later, I made the world youth team and actually ended up having, like, I was kind of good at hurdles. Who knew? And that high school teacher and I ended up staying coach athlete until we made the Olympics together 8 years later, which is so wild.
That's amazing. So you had somebody like supporting you kind of the whole way through. What was it that kept you motivated to keep going? Like, of course, I'm assuming liking hurdling and track and field or hurdling, but what was it inside of you that kept you like going for continuously that long towards your goal?
I think I just really wanted a sport. I wanted like a team. I wanted a group of friends that it was like an easy solve for that you kind of like all had like a collective shared passion. And so initially it was really about just like finding something that wasn't school, that wasn't like, you know, in your everyday. And so I wanted to find something like extracurricular. And so I think it was largely just a pursuit of like finding friends, finding a sense of belonging that really helped me kind of push forward. And for whatever reason, it like didn't super deteriorate my confidence. Like where for some reason I was still willing to put myself out there again and again and again and keep getting the door slammed in my face. And I think that largely comes from like my comfort in being okay with not being good at something. And it's something that, you know, there's other times like once I eventually did make the Olympic Games, I lost that comfort of not being good at running, you know, like I now needed to be good at running. And I think we all have that when we achieve a certain level of success in one area of our life, we might not be comfortable anymore, kind of feeling like you're slipping away from that. And so it's important to remind ourselves that it's okay to be bad at stuff. And the first time you do anything, even in the exact same arena as a sport that you're really good at, or like you're really good in a certain art form, or it's okay to then have a new tier that you're stepping up to. And in that same arena, be bad at it for a second, because that's the only way you're climbing the ladder and getting better and better. So yeah, I think that's an integral part of it, and not something I didn't know I was doing at the time, but I can now look back on and remind myself in moments when I start to feel like, oh God, I'm not good. It's like, wait, that's okay.
Yeah. It's kind of like one of those you reflecting back in the past, and it's maybe like holding yourself to a good standard, but not being super hard on yourself where you're like you have to make mistakes to learn, essentially what you're saying, right? Like,
right. Exactly.
So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When you so you got to the Olympics,
Yeah.
he did. How was that for you? You said that it was like, that's when you started to kind of experience some self-doubt.
Yeah. So the year before the Olympics, I knew I wanted to make the games. This is something I had, you know, I clearly had a knack for hurdling. I had won the national championships, and I now knew this was a dream of mine. And the year before, I ended up getting an injury that sidelined me for 3 months initially. And that injury was a stress fracture in my femur. And so a stress fracture is a deterioration of your bone from the inside out. And your femur is your biggest thigh bone, the biggest bone in your entire body. And so the year before the Olympics, the biggest bone in my body is breaking in half, and I'm devastated because the doctor tells me I have to sit out for 3 months. And I had never touched Olympic standard before. And so I knew I needed every day, every week, every month to make that dream come true. And so sitting out for even just 3 months was already too long. And going through that 3 months, I was in this like roller coaster ride of emotions where there was moments I felt like, okay, maybe this is possible. And I would go to my physiotherapist and we'd talk about how we could stay fit and motivated and maybe the goal could stay within reach. And then I would go home and I would question my self-worth and I would consider giving up because everyone would introduce me as, oh, this is my friend Sarah. She's trying to make the Olympics. Isn't that cool? And what if they couldn't do that anymore? Who was I without that? Would people still like me? Would people respect what I had to say? And losing that sense of identity was just like an epic, like feeling of sense of loss. And so I considered giving up multiple times. And this roller coaster ride of like feeling like, okay, maybe I am motivated. And like, no, I'm definitely not going up and down over and over again, was exhausting. And so by the time I made it through the 3 months, I was like, okay, like, let's go see the doctor. Like, let's just get this over with. Can I go? Can I train? Is it healed? And he's like, sorry, Sarah, bone's still not healed. Come back in another month. And that 4th month turned into 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 months. And so 9 months, the year before the Olympic Games, I'm just sitting around. And everyone around me reminded me to remain realistic, that this was already an impossible goal. And I had now made it more challenging on myself by sitting around for 9 months.
Yeah.
And on my first day back to training, I decided to get the word believe tattooed onto my wrist. And I said, when I make the Olympic Games, I'm going to put the Olympic rings underneath here. And not suggesting everyone tattoos themselves of their goals, but as you know, in many of my keynotes, I talk to everyone about finding your word and what's that word for you. And a word that reminds you of all of the obstacles you've already overcome, or the strength that you have inside, or the times that you've already had to get back up in other moments. Mm-hmm. And for me, that word was believe. And so I set out to start training with the word believe tattooed on my wrist. And I knew that I only had 6 months after making it through 9 months of sitting out. I only had 6 months to get back to who I was and then improve an entire second to hit Olympic standard. And that was seemingly impossible, but inch by inch, step by step, insert cliche line here. 6 months later, I win the Olympic trials, go to the Olympic Games, and finish as an Olympic semifinalist and one of the youngest competitors in the field. And I came home and I finished the tattoo and I put the Olympic rings underneath the believe exactly where I said I would. And it blew my own mind because I was like, holy shit, believing in yourself works.
That's literally every single time I hear you tell a story, just from being at the Believe Summits with you, I get chills because it's so just amazing coming from like the sport perspective where you had a really big, intense goal, but also that it's can be kind of shifted to a lot of aspects of your life too, like mm-hmm. believing. And holy crap, an injury that big and to have to like pick yourself up and then pursue to the Olympics and kind of go through that is really tough. And like you're saying, like a mental game, just sitting around for 9 months, not really the same way. When you were kind of dealing with people being like, this is my friend Sarah, she's an Olympian, and you were kind of off, what was there anything that you were doing during that time that was helping you kind of like re-identify yourself?
Yeah, so a big part of my practice in off like track work was journaling. And the journaling took on a form, not necessarily like a gratitude journal, but more so like a descriptor of everything that was going on. And so I would write in like, what modified workout did I do that day? Did I do water running where I don't touch the ground, so no impact? Was I eventually upgraded to like being able to go on the spin bike, which is like a low grade of impact? Mm-hmm. Was I able to walk around for X amount of minutes and do weight bearing activity in that way? And then also, how did I sleep? What was I feeling? What was I thinking? What was happening in my partnership at that time? Like, were we going through a bad week, or like, were we excited? Was I moving? Was I like, I moved with that stress fracture. I remember it was miserable, but so I'm like on crutches, like watching people carry around. This is ridiculous. I'm very lucky to have an incredible support system. But like what was going on around my world. And what it did is it allowed me to track progress, not necessarily like, sure, I might not be physiologically getting better or stronger, but look what I was thinking last week and how defeated I felt and how I was able to rise above that. What other activities were happening in the day? Did I talk about how I listened to different music? Did I listen to a podcast? Did I have a great talk with a friend face to face? Like, what were the things that enabled me to pull myself out of that hole so that in a moment where I did feel defeated and deflated, I could know how to recreate the picking myself back up. And if you don't journal it, if you don't write it down, like we might not recognize patterns and habits that we have that either serve us or actually hinder our ability to get back up or be strong or think differently. And so by journaling that stuff down, I was able to have a very good read on things that served me and things that did not. And also like I could also look back on a grand scheme of things. And if maybe after 3 months of going through that stuff, I'm like, I'm nowhere closer to this goal. I'm still sitting around. And I could be like, oh, but actually look at my cross training. Before I was only doing 5 minutes of water running. Now I can do 25 minutes of water running. And so there is progress, even in a moment where it feels like there's none. And so it was a mind calming technique as much as it was also a tool for figuring out what I needed.
I really liked that. I mean, I journal in my own life, but I've used it to look at kind of the reflection of my days, but to see, I've never journaled progress in way of like rehab for physical injuries. And it's interesting to say it like that you did that. I've had, it's kind of different, but I've had 2 back surgeries. So I had to go through physio and stuff like that. And it makes me think like if I were to be a bit more mindful in those situations during my rehab, I maybe would have been a bit easier on myself for still seeing like, hey, today I did this, where sometimes the goals just felt like really big. So
yeah,
like breaking it down into smaller parts and just like you said, the little bits of gratitude too, that helps. So
and I think creating small steps is like a really integral part of being able to be resilient through times you're like being challenged both physically and mentally.
Yeah.
And something I've been exploring in creating during this time of COVID-19, where we all suddenly have a moment to stop and reflect instead of speeding up. Like for the first time, the world is slowing down instead of speeding up. And I've been meeting with and interviewing people who have their PhD in resilience. I've been talking with other Olympic athletes, Olympic coaches, executives in C-suite roles, talking about what's their mindset right now and how are they picking themselves back up. And I've now put it into what I'm calling the momentum model of how do we create momentum in a time where adversity is all around us. And it really consists of 3 steps and 10 tactics. And the 3 steps is like when something first, like we all start off with a goal, right? We know what we want. You wanted to come back from your back surgery. I wanted to make the Olympic Games. Someone might be striving for a new career or a different role in their same company, whatever that is. And the first thing you do when setting a goal is you have to like assess, okay, where am I at? And like, what are the facts? What are the things I know to be true right now? What are the skills I have? Like what's happening around me? Like all of that is about just asking yourself the question, what's happening right now? And that's step 1. Step 2 is you then choose. So first it's assess. Second is choose. And in choose, this is where you ask yourself the question, what's in my control? Because now you've done an assessment of like, okay, where am I at in relation to the goal? What's happening around me? Okay, but now with all those things, what's in my control? What can I actually create change on? And in that moment, now you're looking at, okay, this is something that like I can physically create change on. So I'm going to focus my energy and effort on this, because all the stuff that's out of my control, that's a waste of my time and effort. And so you assess, you choose. Third and final step, once you've assessed and choose, is it now allows you to create your action plan. And in the action plan, you can sit down and look at, the milestones you might have to hit to get to that, whatever that goal is. But it's important to ask yourself the question, what is my first step? Because we can overwhelm ourselves in a moment where we feel really like, oh my God, I need to do that big thing and I'm so far away and these are the things in my control, but oh my God, I have to do 7,000 steps between now and then to get that thing. And so it's like, okay, yes, sure. Writing them all out to see the path you might have to take is potentially helpful. But also what's perhaps potentially more helpful is just asking yourself, what's the first step? What I label hurdle one. Like, what is the first thing you need to have to overcome or achieve in order to set you up for the rest of the race? And, I'm talking in race sense because that's my world, but like, what is that one simple action step? And now, as you're going through this process of assess, choose, act, you're going through this cycle. It's repeating itself, because once you've achieved that one action, you go back to assess. Okay, now what's true? Now what's gone on? What else do I have? I've created resources, or I've gained support, or I've changed my mindset in some capacity. And from there, okay, now I'm assess, choose, act, assess, choose, act. And you're taking steps towards that goal, whatever that goal is. And then what's really beautiful is then shit hits the fan. And now you've been doing this process of assess, choose, act over and over and over again. And what you've done is you've become really efficient at this process in creating momentum. And I don't think about momentum as speeding up towards the goal, but instead it's your ability to take small, consistent actions quickly. And so when something comes along, now this obstacle, a hurdle, let's say, comes along, you've become so efficient at creating momentum, at doing this process, assess, choose, act, that now when that obstacle comes your way, you instantly know, okay, assess what happened, what's going on, what's the new realization, what's the new circumstances I'm dealing with. Okay, choose what's in my control. Okay, and now act. What's the thing I need to be doing to set myself up for the rest of the race, or the small, simple step I can take to then overcome this obstacle. And so not only does this process help you build momentum and build resilience while you're achieving that goal, but then the byproduct of this is the fact that you then learn the process to apply resilience. So now you know how to build resilience and apply it, all by using the exact same 3-step process. And I think that that's the most powerful thing we can be doing in a moment like this, where we are being challenged to think differently, think creatively, think innovatively, because the world has changed all of a sudden in what seems like half a second.
Yeah, literally. At first, that's really helpful advice, because at first I found with myself, when everything started to change, it was almost like it didn't kind of feel real for me at first. And my transition took a week or two longer than I thought it would have in my head to get to. Now I'm feeling like I have that momentum of being productive and my flow and what my current reality is. But having those 3 steps and just like kind of teaching people that and implementing it, and just as a basic life skill, like,
I'm so glad.
Words,
I'm so glad that you think that, because this has been now like all the last 6 weeks, like this has been the work I've been working on, is like, how do I create this to help other people be able to apply this to their own lives? So I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah, it's like, it's going to be really helpful. And the fact that like you're consulting with, like you said, you're consulting with like high performers, other athletes, you're getting lots of different opinions on it too. So you're finding something that's going to be really like round and whole for everybody.
Right.
So I really like that. Is there any like things that you do, like I'm just thinking, because I've recently started doing like morning practice questions for myself. I've been listening to I can never say his last name properly, the Brendan Bouchard, do you know who he is?
Bouchard, yeah.
Bouchard, thank you. So I've ordered his planner, because I'm just like diving right into it. And it just made me think. I was wondering if anybody else, do you ask yourself morning prompt questions, or is there any rituals you do every single morning to kind of like get your head ready for the day, like to take on whatever's coming?
My biggest morning ritual is coffee. I know. I love coffee so much. I love coffee. It's like so bad. I'm like, oh my gosh, am I addicted? Like, what's going on here? I'm about to have a sip of it right now.
Yeah, I'll join you.
So good. But the other thing I do fairly religiously that really helps me get going in the morning, and it's not for everyone, but I love plans. I love schedules. And so usually before I go to sleep, I plan out every minute of every day. And so I might break it down as like 7:30 to 8, I am making breakfast, making coffee. 8 to 8:15, I am like setting up my workstation for the day of like whatever I might need near me or whatever. 8:15 to 8:45, I am writing this email, sending that PDF and whatever. 8:45 to 9:20, like I might make it so specific where it's like kind of random intervals where I'm like, I think I need 55 minutes to work on that document, and I'll put it in there. And then I'll schedule in my workouts. I'll schedule in like when I'm eating lunch for 20 minutes or whatever. And it's just like back to back, scheduled, because then the second I get up, I know exactly what I'm doing. And I don't have to worry about, oh my God, am I going to have time for that? And like, there's some things that take longer than I expect them to do. And that can roll over. And then suddenly I have to reschedule that for the next day or whatever. But a big part of me being able to jumpstart into the morning and like take action and feel like I'm taking steps towards accomplishing things is the fact that like I've already scheduled in exactly what I'm doing. And like I said, I know this isn't for everyone because some people don't like to have it that schedule. It might make them anxious. I'm like, oh my God, I have to do this thing in 45 minutes. And like, and so it's not for everyone, but for me, it really helps me feel focused of like, oh my gosh, my email's piling up. But look, I have 40 minutes in the afternoon where I'm going through any email that's come in since I've been doing work all morning. I'm going to pull out and put into a to-do list of like what action items I need to take. And so it can just give you peace of mind where you're not like, oh God, things are piling in. I don't know what's happening in there. It's like, well, I know when I'm going to get to that. So calm down, brain. Like we're good.
Yeah, exactly. Do you feel like sometimes too having your day scheduled can help you, like if there's ever downtime and well, I'm sure like when you're busy, there's always things to do, but does that time where you're like, I'm not sure what to do or you don't feel like doing, it probably helps to have a schedule. So you're like, oh, this is it. Like it kind of just like, do you find that it helps you on those times where you're feeling kind of like, meh?
Certainly, like when motivation is low and you've given yourself the exact task you need to do, then you almost don't have to be as intrinsically motivated because you have an extrinsic like commitment.
Yeah.
And so absolutely, like there's mornings I wake up and I'm just kind of like, ugh. Like yesterday was a heavy day. I had so much, like I went from 7:30 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. and I'm exhausted and I had 3 keynotes and I did a podcast and then I did all these emails and like, I can't fucking, sorry.
No, it's real life.
Like I don't swear on podcasts very often, but I really got into myself there. But yeah, you just like, you can't bring yourself to do it. But I'm like, well, that's when it's scheduled in. If I don't do it now, well, tomorrow I know I already want to do like this other batch of to-do things. And so I need to do it today. And so it's that spark that helps get you there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have you always been like a high motivated person, or do you feel like having kind of like a good support network of being an athlete and having a coach kind of helps push that into like your adult life?
I think both. Like I do think that I'm fairly driven in my email signature is in pursuit of excellence because that's me. Like I'm just like the same way, you know, people would play video games for hours, you know, like once you achieve a certain level, you're like, well, can I get to the next one? Can I get to the next one? And that's how I feel about my life sometimes where once I got to a certain level in sport, I'm like, well, can I do more? Can I do better? Can I get faster? And then at the same time, then there's like in my business, like, okay, well, we've grown this big. How many more people can we impact? How many other ambassadors can I bring on? Like, what's the impact that we can have? That's the next tier up. And so, I think that's kind of been part of me. And then at the same time, I've also been really fortunate to have an incredible support network around me who's also shown me what's possible. Like being, you know, encouraged by that high school teacher who told me to do track and field. My life would be nothing like this without them. And that's a big part of the Believe Initiative, which you've been an ambassador at, and this youth organization that I run all across North America. We try to be that teacher, the teacher who I had who said, do track and field. He believed in me before I ever believed in myself. And now I'm trying to be that person for as many people as possible through the Believe Initiative. And so I think now yes, I'm driven, but I've also had those people supporting me and reminding me why yesterday I said I could, when today, for some reason, I think I can't. And having that support is a massive, massive asset. And I often tell people, if you don't feel like you have anyone that can be that for you, well, then who can you be that person for? Because it's a chain reaction and it cycles back. Like if you can be that person for someone else, like, hey, how can I help you? Like, what's your big goal? Like, love to do what I can to help you get there. Then they might be like, wow, like that was really nice of them. Or like, and then they want to do that for you too, because it's rewarding to give. It's fulfilling to give. And when someone might be like, wow, I want to feel that way. I want to feel good about like giving back to someone. And it's shocking how like what I've learned in the fact I'm in a field where I'm running my own business. I'm not under a big corporation that has corporate training and leadership development. And like, there's none of that for me. But what I've been lucky to learn and be inspired to do from encouragement of others is just like ask for help, because people are really willing to help. And so in an unstructured environment where you don't feel like you have that, you can go and reach out to someone and say like, hey, I saw you on LinkedIn. You have this career. I'd love to find out. And like be specific on, so they know you're not going to waste their time, and be like, I'd love to find out more about this specific thing that was on your resume that I have an interest in. And this is where I want to go one day. So like, that's why I'm curious. And someone will probably be like, cool, this person knows what they want. They want to seek this out and it feels good to help. So sure. Yeah. Let's have a Zoom chat or a coffee chat or whatever it is. And so I think asking for help is another really big way to find that motivation. If you don't feel like you are that person intrinsically, people want to help.
Yeah. And I've kind of seen that myself within the past year of getting the internal confidence to do those asks, to even just like, for example, asking you to spend an hour with me on this podcast. That was something maybe a year or 2 years ago I wouldn't have done. But when you ask, oh, you're still there. I thought my computer froze for a second. I'm sorry.
You're good. That's good. I thought that too that one time.
But when like you really ask for things, they come into your life and kind of like attract whatever you want to say, but attract, like the universe will bring good to you. You will bring good to your own life. Mm-hmm. So like with the Believe initiative, so I wanted to touch on that. So when you started it, like you started after the Olympics, right?
Well, so 2012, I told you the story of the Believe and overcoming the obstacle and then making the Olympic Games.
Yeah.
Then I just started speaking as a keynote speaker because people were asking me to share that story and said, come tell my kid what you did and how you overcame an obstacle by believing in yourself. And then I got more and more reps and practice on speaking, and I loved it. I really enjoyed sharing the story and seeing the influence and impact that could have on someone else's journey. And that was super rewarding. But I was still largely just focused on my next Olympics, which was in 2016. But in 2016, just 2 months before the trials, I worked out on a day I should have never worked out because my hamstrings were super tight. And during the workout, I actually ended up tearing my hamstring, and it was so bad. It ripped an inch tear in my hamstring. And this is right before the 2016 Rio Olympics. Like I had just overcome the injury and made it at the last Olympic Games. So I was hoping that this Olympic Games would go through a little more smoothly. Yeah. And of course it doesn't. And so I get this injury, I tear my hamstring, I rush back, I do everything I can to try to get back for the 2016 Olympic trials. And at that point I had been a 4-time national champion. And so I knew that top 3 would make the Olympic Games. And maybe even at 90%, even coming back from this injury, maybe I could still get top 3 because I had been a 4-time national champion. But on the day of the race, I do everything I could. Like, I feel like no one wanted it more than I did. Like, I gave that race everything. And when we get to the finish line, I end up getting 4th, and I miss qualifying by half a second. And I was so heartbroken because for 4 years I had been known as Sarah Wells, the Olympian. And now Sarah Wells, the Olympian, doesn't make the Olympics. And I was super devastated and really felt like such a failure. I thought my friends wouldn't like me anymore. I thought no one would ever invite me to do a speaking engagement again. I certainly didn't think anyone would ever have any interest in calling me onto a podcast. Like, no, this girl failed. She doesn't know how to achieve success. She doesn't know what she's doing. So yeah, no, she's going to lose. Like, I thought for sure I was losing all respect. And I took a year off sport after that because I felt like such a failure. And I couldn't go back to the track. It was too hard. It was too painful. And in that year, that's when I founded the Believe Initiative, because I questioned everything. Because for 4 years, I had been telling people, if you believe in yourself, you achieve your goals. But now I believed in myself and I did not achieve my goal. And so was it a lie? Is it all a joke? And I realized, you know what, I actually believe in myself more strongly after not making the Olympic Games, even more so than when I did. And I think that's because we can all remember a time where we felt like a failure, where we thought our friends weren't going to like us anymore, where an epic, miserable defeat had us feeling like we had wasted our time, wasted our lives. Like, what were we doing? What were we thinking? And I was still willing in moments like that to still get on the start line, regardless of knowing the outcome, regardless of the circumstances that could have defined how it ended. I still stood on the start line, and that showed me a strength inside I didn't know I had. And we all have the ability to do that, of just choosing to get back up, of choosing to find an alternative path to apply those skills, apply that learning, apply, who you've become. And so I decided, you know what? You don't build self-belief through achievements. You build it through action. And so how can I help other people build self-belief through action? And that's when I founded the Believe Initiative. And as you know, you've come to our events and we take a passion that students have and a problem that they want to solve. And we use that passion to solve that problem, and they build self-belief through action. And so now it's this program where we've traveled across North America running an in-person full day event for schools. It's like hype and energy and excitement and speakers and workshops. And then after we leave, we equip the teachers with curriculum that they then serve to their students and teach them through a 10-week curriculum where they take those passion projects and they build them out and they build self-belief through action. And then the third and final step is we come back to every single school and we see them at their inspiration fair where they showcase the projects they did and the impact it had and how it helped them believe in themselves. And it's the most rewarding, most fulfilling thing I've ever got to do. And I now realize why I needed to go through both sides of the story, because I'm not Sarah Wells, the Olympian, who's speaking from a place of like on a pedestal where, I believed in myself and then I achieved my goal. So come up here with me on the clouds where all the good things happen. No, instead, I'm actually saying, I know the power of believing in yourself. And my most recent experience with that is actually failure. My most recent time is that I believed in myself and I did not get the goal. Yet I still believe so strongly. Yet I'm still going to stand up and tell you the importance of being resilient and the power of believing in yourself. And I think that gives me a sense of credibility to recognize where people are at and empathize with them and really be a guide and a source of light to help them out of their experience that they might be having where they feel that way. And it's totally fair to mourn the loss, to feel sadness. But I try to help everyone see that, and you would know this too, that I end every single keynote with this line, that hard work isn't always going to lead to success, but being resilient will always lead to another opportunity for it. And that's what I try to help people understand. Like, you're right, hard work, like it's not always going to lead to success. It's not always going to end the way we want. And that sucks. That sucks so bad.
Yeah.
But if we are willing to be resilient, to adopt a mindset that allows us to assess, choose, act, well, then we can take those learnings and apply them to inspire our next chapter. And that will enable us to find our next opportunity for success.
Bam. Sorry, I'm just like, every time you talk, I'm always mind blown. It's, well, like the first off, it's really brave that you're able to kind of share your story. Like, it must take a lot of bravery to be able to be like, look, I was vulnerable. I was down. I had a really bad injury. I got back up, because like you're saying, in that moment, you kind of felt like everything you had been doing for so long was over, until you were kind of able to like pick yourself up back again and see it all. So I think it takes a lot of bravery too, to be able to stand in front of a crowd and tell your story when it includes failure, because that's being vulnerable and it's showing your most true, authentic self too. So what you're doing is making a huge difference. Like being a part of the Believe Initiative, even just seeing what's happening with the children and the students that are a part of it, but as well as kind of the whole community that you've created among all of the ambassadors too, is something that really should be acknowledged too, because I think you're kind of just spreading your light to everybody, and it's just a very safe, positive place. So I'm excited that it's growing for you too.
Thank you. And I'm so grateful to have you a part of it.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, so I guess this is, I'd have to say, the fourth episode of the podcast. I'm currently in the learning phase, as you can tell.
Oh, good. You're doing a
Yeah.
great job. You're asking wonderful questions.
Oh, thank you. I wrote a bunch out, but then I was like, aren't podcasts, you're just supposed to talk? So, yeah. But
You did a
yeah.
great job.
Yeah, but it's all about like kind of accept it, like what you're saying, accepting the parts that aren't as easy. And as somebody who's in the parts right now where I'm kind of like taking those steps up, and it's not perfect and it's not where I want it to be, but I know it's, if it's not even that goal, it's going to lead to something else. It's helpful to talk to people, to have conversations. It's just really, really, really valuable, because I feel like it could help kind of like my mind, others people's minds, by sharing this, stay on track and stay like hopeful, not even to say like that there's despair, but I guess in a time where maybe people are feeling a little bit not themselves, like with COVID.
Right.
I feel like your message is just really empowering for people. And like I've seen it hands-on, the difference it can make with like the leader, especially the leadership students, like all the students too, but the leadership students, I love seeing them too, because they just like, they're so down for it, you know,
I know, they're the best.
So yeah, it's really cool. And yeah, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate having you here.
Of course. I'll just share also where people can find or connect if they're listening and want to find out more about the Believe Initiative. You can go to believeinitiative.com. It's a lot of vowels. Be careful. Make sure you're spelling it right. I screw it up all the time. So believeinitiative.com. And then social media, you can find me at Sarah Wells 400mh, like Sarah Wells 400-meter hurdles. And Sarah is with an H, SARAHWELLS 400mh. On Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, you'll find me. I don't know. Look Olympian. Look at Sarah Wells the Olympian. Well, thanks for having me. This has been a blast.
Thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate it.
Of course.